If you want to get service, selection, and price so low, the Record Archive is the place to go.
This is Commander
You're listening to Grim Dystopian with Freaky Kids and Benny G, the music podcast for everything metal.
That was 2+1 by BML. coming off of their 2014 release, That Their Dog's a Chicken.
I like it.
Me too.
This week, we have the pleasure of speaking with award-winning documentary filmmaker Jesse Weil. His work has been featured on ESPN, Investigation Discovery, Netflix, and National Geography. We were first introduced to him as the filmmaker behind Jason Becker's documentary Not Dead Yet, which took us on a journey of perseverance, inspiration, admiration, and brought us a deep understanding of the power of love and support.
So listen in as we talk to Jesse about Jason's film, his latest Netflix series, The Ripper, some of his other projects. Les Claypool's in there. Werner Herzog makes an appearance. Clockwork Orange is talked about briefly.
West Memphis 3.
All kinds of good stuff. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Let's go. So I think we wanted to start with our introduction to you, to your work, was the Jason Becker documentary, Not Dead Yet.
Yeah.
Can we kind of start with that?
Yeah, that's cool.
Okay. So that was your first feature full-length documentary, yeah?
Yeah, so that was the first feature doc I ever did, and it was I think that was released something like 9 years ago. But yeah, it definitely doesn't seem like 9 years. It's pretty crazy when I think about it.
So that being your first really release, what was it? And this is according to the internet, so it could be not entirely accurate, but I think it is. It won 9 awards.
Yeah, I mean, it was on the festival circuit for quite a while, about a year, which is pretty typical for. Well, it's not typical actually. I mean, it just depends on how many festivals you get into, but it just sort of did the circuit for a while. And just picked up various awards. I mean, it didn't win every one of them, but it was pretty amazing how well received it was, and it was just great to sort of introduce Jason to a whole new audience. So that was really, really cool, and it sort of invigorated him, inspired him a bit more to write more, to reach out to new fans, and so that was really great to see how it sort of lifted his spirits a bit as well.
Yeah.
And everyone else's.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, thanks.
It was. We've seen a lot of documentaries, a lot of music documentaries, and that one was really kind of life-changing for us. It hit kind of all the key factors about kind of his life, but it was also super inspirational and really touching and sad too. Yeah, I mean,
thanks very much. It's a story I've wanted to tell since I was a teenager, and I sort of finally got around to doing it. And it was gonna, originally when I was in film school way back in the day, it was like, I'm gonna make I'll make it into a feature scripted film. But then once I realized how expensive they were, especially when you're talking about something which would have been a period piece in a way, because you're talking about the 80s and the early 90s predominantly, and then it sort of developed into maybe a short film that could then develop into a feature, and then a short doc, and then I just said, you know what, this story's it's too big to sort of encapsulate in a short work. So it just expanded into a feature doc pretty quickly. As soon as Jason sort of gave me the green light to tell a story, I knew what I wanted to do. And it just sort of fell into place after that.
Was there? I know you said that you were kind of when you first met him, you were kind of starstruck a little bit.
Yeah, I have to say that was weird. Seeing him, because I mean, I had seen before that. I'd seen famous people. I'd seen actors and stuff mainly. I'd even seen big musicians, just wherever. I mean, just at award shows I went to or whatever. I saw Jimmy Page. He was one of my idols, and Lemmy and like all these amazing John Fogerty and Irma Thomas, like all these amazing musicians, and I was absolutely blown away when I see those guys, Nick Cave, and I just, your heart just sort of drops and you see them, you're like, oh my God, they're actually real.
Mm-hmm.
And when you see actors, even though like film is my life really, I'm not that bothered really, but when you see musicians, you're just like, oh my God. And when I saw him, it was weird because we had to go around. It was dark. We got stuck in the worst traffic. We got stuck on, I think it was the Richmond Bridge. I don't know what bridge it was. But we flew into San Francisco. It was just the worst traffic for like 2 hours. And then we finally got there. It was really dark. I was a little bummed out because, I knew he had this, routine and he was going to be going to sleep pretty soon. I wanted to spend as much time with him as possible. So anyway, we get there. We rock up and we have to go around back. And when around back, you could see him through, I remember, like through the sliding window, the sliding door window.
Uh-huh.
And I just see him in his chair, and I just stopped. It was really, that to me was an amazing moment, because I was like, I had spoken to him on the phone and stuff, but I was like, oh my God, like he's real. Because I think there's a lot of mythology about Jason, and there's a lot of, he's a living, breathing legend, and I don't know, that to me was probably the most starstruck I've ever been in my life, really.
Wow,
It's amazing.
that's cool. Yeah.
So I have a two-part question for you.
Sure.
We read in an interview that you actually reached out to Jason when you were 19, still in film school. And you kind of put the hold on it because you felt like you didn't have the experience to encapsulate his entire story. So what made you contact him 10 years later, and how often did you think of your vision of a Jason Becker during those 10 years?
Well, that's a great question, and I totally forgot that I had remembered that I said that. I tracked him down. I think back in film school, I tracked him down via this guy that knew him, who oddly had the same last name, but they weren't related. And then got in touch with him, wrote him an email, and I think I just sort of froze when I realized, oh my God, like he is interested in speaking to me about this. And I think I realized, what the hell am I doing? I have no clue. I'm going to screw up his story. Like, what am I doing? Because the thing, and then I'll jump back, when I ended up making it 10 years later, I just felt this immense amount of pressure to tell his story right. I knew a lot of his fans. He's very beloved, and I just was like, oh my God, I can't screw this up. And that's sort of how I felt when I was 19. I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. And this isn't, you always make mistakes. And when you first start doing something, particularly when you're young, and I'm like, this is not the one I want to make mistakes with. So I went off and made some other short films and stuff. And it wasn't until really later in life where I felt I had matured. I had learned a lot, and I knew that I could do it. I knew that I could do it now. And I think the reason I reached out to him again is just regret. It was like, this is the one story of my life I really need to tell. I want to tell. And if I don't do it, it'll be one of the biggest regrets of my life. And so I reached out to him. Luckily, no one had done it. But the thing is, he gets asked all the time.
Oh, I can imagine.
Not anymore, because obviously one's been done now. But he would get asked all the time, and people would come out and they'd film him for a bit. It was a lot of work for him, and then it would just sort of fizzle out, and they would never follow through, because I think a lot of people don't realize making a film is a lot of work. It really, really is a ton of work, and it takes up a ton of your time, a lot of your resources. So he was reluctant at first when I reached out to him again. Luckily, he didn't remember that I was one of the people who get in touch with him all the time and then blow him off. So that was great. But it's just a massive commitment for him. And I was just really glad. I had to convince him a little bit. The first time I did, the second time I had to convince him a bit, because again, he gets contacted all the time for this, and has had people film with him, and it just didn't turn to anything, and he was, disappointed. So I had to convince him, and eventually, I did, and that was it.
That's awesome. So you mentioned you spent several months on the phone corresponding through email with him and his family. When did you decide enough is enough? Like, let's put the wheels in motion here and start creating his story.
Well, I mean, I think it was about a week. It took a week of convincing, and I initially, he said, "Look, if you're really serious, we can talk more about it." And then I was, and then but he still wasn't. I just had to convince him. So I went off and I just ripped tons of videos and stuff off of, and interviews that he had done off of, wherever online, on YouTube mainly, and I cut together sort of like a sizzle trailer, a sizzle / sort of fake trailer based on all this found footage that I ripped off the internet and sent it to him, and he just really, really liked it. And I think he was also impressed that I even bothered to do something like that. And I think once I did that, he's like, okay, cool, this kid's serious, let's do it.
Yeah.
And then from there I started a crowdfunding campaign. I mean, from there it was just like, I'm in this now, like there's no turning back. Especially I remember the way I felt the first time 10 years earlier. I felt really dejected, and I was like, I'm definitely going to do this now. And so it was just, there was no turning back. And then I just spent, months on the phone with his friends, his family, just kind of researching with them, asking them loads of questions. So when I rocked up to actually do the interviews, I knew what I wanted to ask them. I knew I was prepared. It wasn't. It then wasn't like a story / fact-finding exercise when I'm actually with them and you're paying a crew and you have limited amount of time. You need to be prepared, and so that's what the sort of months leading into the actual shoot, that's what they were about.
So the movie, I think, really effectively takes the viewer on a journey through Jason's story. A lot of it, like I said before, emotional and touching. Can you, other than when you first met him and you were kind of starstruck, was there a point during the creation of the film that stands out to you as like something above, like when you first met him?
Yeah, I think it was when I was making it. I think it was, there were so many moments, I think, when you're in the edit and everything just comes together. And you get goosebumps when you cut a sequence and then you add the music and everything, and it's just fun because when you're writing and you're researching and you're filming, you're sort of just assembling all the parts, you're collecting the parts, and it's not until you get into this big massive like box of jigsaw puzzle pieces, and they're all great. But you have to then assemble them, and you have to assemble them and there's a million different ways you can do it, but you have to assemble them in the way that you feel is the best, that you feel represents the story, and the identity of the story that you want to tell. And that's my favorite part of the process. And I think there was just so many times in the edit where, I was like, oh my God, this is happening, like and I think mainly it was drawing out the father and son relationship between, Jason and Gary. I really wanted that to come through, because that's just such an important, part of Jason's story in his life and Gary's story in his life. And when I saw that, that interaction with them, especially in the third part of the film, that was really magical for me. I loved that moment. And I think just, obviously when we premiered the film, we showed it at Cinequest in San Jose. There were some other festivals that wanted to show it, but we decided to premiere it in San Jose because it was pretty far from where Jason lives, but it was just sort of on the edge of where he was able to travel. He doesn't really get in the car and travel all that much. It's a big production. But I think just him being there, and then when they had to actually move the first screening because it sold out so quickly, and then they had to move it to a bigger theater. So I actually have the original ticket of the very first screening, but it's not actually in the theater where it showed. It showed in this other theater that was like 1,000 seats, and it was pretty much full. And then just seeing Jason there when the lights came on afterwards and everyone just gave him a standing ovation. I mean, that was awesome. That was the best.
Oh, I have goosebumps.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the best part of the whole process. And then I remember, and then just for me personally, I remember flying over to go to the premiere, and I actually crashed at Jason's parents' place, Pat and Gary. They let me crash there. They had a spare room. And then I remember Gary driving me to the airport after the screening, or after it when I had to leave. And he said goodbye. He's like, "Boy, I'm glad we met you." And I thought, "Oh man, that's the coolest thing anyone's ever said to me." Just that I made, I didn't screw up their story. I made them proud, and they were happy with what I did, and that was a really great moment. It sort of was like a nice end to that whole journey with them.
That's so incredible.
Yeah.
Did you have the opportunity to learn vocalize?
No, it was it was so, I don't know how they do it, to be honest. I didn't spend enough time with him. I think we had 2 different trips, and we spent total about, I think, 5 weeks in San Francisco. And the first time it was like 3 weeks. The second time it was a couple weeks. But then we went to LA. We were filming in LA for a bit. No, I think that takes a lot of time. It's a very easy system in theory, but I think in practice you need to work on it. You need to, you need to really know how it works. I mean, it's just incredible. No, I didn't learn how to do it. I mean, just watching them do it, I got like eye strain. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing. I mean, their eye muscles must be like the strongest in the world. I mean, that's just how they do it. Pretty incredible.
It's absolutely amazing. It's amazing. And like you said, I mean, I think you really captured the dynamic of their family. They have so much love and dedication and loyalty to each other. And throughout the whole film, it's just so touching to see how they all come together.
Yeah, I mean, he has an incredible support team around him, and they're just. I think when you walk into that, what I remember and what I can still even feel when I think about it is when you walk into that house, you just feel this incredible energy. It's, and I'm not one of those weird, crystal wearing people. It's just you can just, sometimes you feel like bad juju, whatever they call it, or you feel good, good juju, and walking in there, there's this like positive energy. There really is. And especially when you go into Gary's art studio, he has this really incredible, we filmed some of his interview in his amazing art studio in his backyard. Especially when you're in there, it's just so cool in there, and you just feel this amazing energy. And it's just, they're sort of infectious to be around, to be honest. I'm not saying that, they're saints, they're people like anyone else, and they have their hardships and stuff, but they are a remarkable family, and the people around them, like Marilyn, and they're just incredible. Yeah, it was sort of sad leaving. You just felt so good, being around them. So, yeah. It was just an amazing experience to just be with them, really.
Oh, I can imagine.
So the first time I saw the movie, I remember thinking, why isn't David Lee Roth in this? His kind of perspective is probably pretty important considering the time frame. And then afterwards, we saw a Q&A with you that someone asked that same question, and you said you reached out to his management. They passed it on to him. He didn't respond. Our question now is, did he ever respond after the fact, after the film was out?
No. No, he didn't. I mean, I think, it was, I don't really know why he doesn't, I don't think he takes part in a lot of stuff. And I've heard him in interviews, and the guy is like, bonkers.
Oh yeah.
I heard him on Mark Maron last year. He was on Joe Rogan last year, I think, and God, he's all over the place. I mean, he's a really interesting guy. He's certainly one of a kind, and I think him and his family were really kind to Jason. Particularly, his parents were really kind to him, especially when he was going through all that stuff. I think I really don't know. I mean, I think for DLR with the whole Jason thing, and Jason felt a little bit, and you'll have to ask him if you ever speak to him, but felt maybe a little bit, I don't know, left in the dust or something like that. But I think, DLR is about, this specific image, and I don't think someone, when he's getting this new supergroup, well, not supergroup, but like, these amazing musicians together for this new album, and and he's trying to not revamp his career, but he's trying to stay relevant in a time when music was really starting to change.
Yeah. And
then suddenly his all-star guitar player comes down with a devastating illness. It's not good PR for him. And this is nobody actually told me this, but this is just, as you learn and you grow, and that would be my guess, is that he was just trying to stay separate from any sort of negativity or any sort of anything like that. And I think I heard an interview one time with Eddie Van Halen, and he was talking about when they were getting back together, and this was like a long time ago. And they were having this, I think Van Halen was having his hip replaced or something. And then they were having this press conference of them getting back together, and then I guess they were asking him questions, and he was talking about his hip replacement. And then when the interview was over and they were, all back together in private, I think, Van Halen was like, and David, just kind of trying to illustrate the kind of person that he was like, this ain't about your fucking hip, man. You know what I mean? And I think, I don't know, and just from that I got this idea of like, obviously he just wants to keep it positive and stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe I'm saying too much, but that's just that was my take on it.
Yeah.
Is he wanted to sort of just move on and just be shrouded in positivity, and that's why he didn't really ever. He sort of just left Jason in the dust, sort of. But he apparently did give him a shout out in this book. But I don't know. He just didn't want to. He didn't want to take part. And I think what's interesting, speaking on Eddie Van Halen, is there's this incredible footage that I had that Jason's uncle had filmed. So when Jason they were putting this together, this benefit for him. This is like a year or two after he started really going downhill, and I think it was like 95, 94, 95. Maybe early 93, I'm not sure. But Eddie Van Halen actually came to Jason's house and sat with him for hours and played guitar and just hung out with him and his family. And it was really sweet, and it really showed you what a sweet guy, Eddie was. But then we approached Eddie Van Halen's lawyer or whoever, his manager, whoever, to use the footage, because you want permission, because it was a private thing, it was a family video, it wasn't like something for publicity.
Yeah.
He didn't want it to be in there because I think he felt like he didn't want people to think he did it just for publicity or press. He wanted it to be something he did for Jason. And I thought that was really, really, really touching. I was pissed because I wanted it in my film.
Yeah.
I thought this is great footage, and it just shows you in a great light. But I never really thought it that way. It was interesting. He didn't want people to think that he just did it so people would think he was a good guy. And I thought that was really cool. And then once he passed, Jason's family actually released the footage in tribute. And yeah. It was like the best. It was some of the best archive that we had that we couldn't use, and but I understood, and you have to respect their wishes.
Yeah.
I think I maybe saw that on YouTube. Does Eddie bring Jason a guitar? Like, give him a guitar?
I think if I remember correctly, he brings him a guitar. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool footage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, do you, Ken, have anything else regarding the Jason Becker Not Dead Yet film?
I have an aside to it.
Okay.
So we read that your guitar teacher at one point turned you on to Jason Becker, right?
Yeah.
What was your introduction? Was it like the Cacophony stuff, or was it actually Jason's solo stuff, or what was it?
It was both. It was, so I'd been through a few guitar teachers, not millions, but about a handful. And, they were all different. And this one guitar teacher of mine, really cool guy, named Ivor Focht. Everyone called him Jack. And he had this green BC Rich bitch. I think it was green.
Uh-huh.
And he was this really, kind of quirky, cool guy with really long hair. And he was really great on guitar. But he was really into, neoclassical sweep picking stuff. And that was sort of new to me, because I was super into shred. I was really into Satriani and Steve Vai. They were my idols.
Mm-hmm.
And when Joe Satriani's Time Machine, I just loved that double album. And Steve Vai and Passion Warfare and Alien Love Secrets and all that stuff. I just loved that stuff. And then went to G3 concerts and all that. And then when I started taking lessons from this guy, he's like, "Hey, do you know Yngwie Malmsteen?" I'm like, no. And he's playing me Yngwie Malmsteen. I'm like, wow, that's pretty crazy. And he's like, and Marty Friedman and Jason Becker and stuff. And I was like, no, what are they? And then you started telling me the story about Jason Becker, and I was like, that is a freaking amazing story.
Mm-hmm.
That would make a great film. And then Yngwie, I sort of bought an album. I think I bought Rising Force or something, maybe an Alcatraz, I'm not sure. And it was cool and whatever, and then Marty, I really, really got into Marty's solo stuff.
Yeah.
But Jason stuff really blew me away, especially Perpetual Burn, the first one. And the fact that he was 17 when he made it.
That's
it was
crazy.
It was just incredible. And when you think about Cacophony, he was 16 when the first one came out. And I was just really drawn to his stuff, especially.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was really playful and really cool. And not only could he shred, but he had a lot of feeling.
Yeah.
And he could rock out too. And I just thought this guy's wicked. I just loved his stuff, really did. I definitely prefer Perpetual Burn and Perspective to the Cacophony. The Cacophony stuff's great.
Yeah. But
the song, the kind of the rock songs, the stuff they did just to get on the radio, and isn't great in my opinion. Yeah. But the stuff, the instrumental stuff with Jason and Marty on those two albums are amazing, like Speed Metal Symphony, and that stuff's wicked. But yeah, it was it was super interesting, and I just got really into shred and sweep picking and all that stuff. But just as a player, I sort of then drifted back into regular rock after a while. Mm-hmm. I found it a little limiting, just for me personally, as a guitar player. But to listen to it was incredible.
Yeah, that makes sense. I had a guitar teacher too, and I remember asking. It sounds like the reverse of maybe what you experienced. This was he was really good, but he was a jazz guitarist. And I remember asking him about Yngwie at the time, and I said I wanted to learn some Yngwie songs, and he goes, "What do you want to learn? What do you want to learn Yngwie for?" And I said, "Isn't he really good?" And he goes, "What does that make me, a god?" And I was like,
"Next."
That's kind of arrogant.
Yeah, those are jazz musicians for you, I suppose. But I mean, it's there was that great line in Whiplash, that film Whiplash, where he's like, "Be careful, you'll end up a rock drummer or something."
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? I was like, what the hell's wrong with rock? I mean, obviously, somebody who's like a master jazz musician, musically they're incredible.
Yeah.
But for me personally, I guess it's about how good the music is, or how pleasing it is to listen to. But
yeah,
I can totally see what he's saying, and it isn't all about speed and all that. It definitely isn't. It's fun to look at and to listen to, but after a while, it gets a bit. I think that was a real challenge making Jason Becker, because I had to sort of forget that I liked his playing. I had to forget that I liked his music, and I had to sort of work with people and editors and stuff that weren't fans. I purposely sought out someone who wasn't a fan, not someone who hated him, but just someone who wasn't like a fan, because I didn't want to make like a fan film, and I needed someone to sort of put that in check if I ever lost my way, or I was like, no, come on, play that 6-minute solo in its entirety, they needed to go, dude, like 45 minutes of this squealing solo is enough, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it has to be accessible to, I wanted it accessible not to a mass audience, because I wanted to sell it to, it was just, you wanted more people outside of his fan base to watch it. I didn't want to make a fan film.
Yeah.
And so, his music isn't as great of a guitar player he is, and as great as I think his music is, not everyone loves shred, not everyone loves that kind of stuff. And so we had to be really choice with that. You had to at one point show off his skill, because you're telling the story about this prodigy and how incredible he was, and you're trying to sell that idea. So you need to kind of show that speed, because I think people that don't play guitar or music or drums or anything, but if they see someone doing it really fast, they go, wow, they're good,
Yeah.
And I think we had to sort of show that. We had to create a platform for him to display those skills, but we couldn't get carried away with it, because I think people would get tired with it. But anyway, that was something that was quite interesting to try and figure out.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. When you were introduced to Jason, did you already have your career path in mind, or did that come later?
That came later. I was sort of involved in the film industry. I ran a film festival for a few years, and I was kind of involved in more exhibition rather than production. And then, because film production is something that can be quite tricky to get into, and so I just thought, well, if I'm going to get into it, no one ever knocks at your door and you answer the door and they go, hey, so we're looking for someone to make this film, do you want to make it? That is never going to happen. You have to sort of build up to being someone where people are just going to give you money to do this. They're going to entrust you with this money and their reputation as a company to do something. So I think you just have to go out and do it, and that's what that's what I did. I wasn't going to wait around for someone to give me the money to do it. I had to just do it. And then from there, because it was a success, it was easier then to get my next film up and running. And then, it's just sort of a snowball effect. And then the more work you do, you build up, a body of work that just helps you get more work. And then it just goes from there. So that was, it was great. I mean, I never thought that, I'll make this and then I'll make more. It was just my whole focus was on making this the best film. And I think there was even a point where I was like, if I never make another one, I won't mind, because I'm just so happy I was able to make this. But then, of course, new stories come up and you get fascinated by those stories, and off you go.
Well, you gave us a perfect segue.
Yeah, I was thinking that. Okay, yeah.
Thanks for that setup.
Sure.
So we originally reached out to you in September, and you got right back to us, and you said, I'd love to chat, but way busy wrapping up a project. Get back to me at the start of the new year, and we'll figure it out. And we're like, okay. So we're twiddling our fingers, waiting. And then December 2020 hits, and then The Ripper drops.
Well, actually, it's funny because that's not what I was working on. But what I was working on is what I'm currently doing, because The Ripper actually finished in May of last year. It just takes a while for this stuff to come out. Like, especially with Netflix or Amazon, they need like a 3-month lead time because they have to translate it into 190 languages or something, and they need to send it out to. So, and also they just pick a good time to drop something, to release something, because they look at their schedule and they go, when's the best time to do something? And usually, and I did something for Netflix about 5 years ago, and they also dropped it just around Christmas, because apparently that is a great time, because that's when everyone's sitting at home, watching and binging loads of stuff. Whereas now that's what people are doing anyway because of COVID. But
right.
So that's interesting. But no, I was actually I'm working on another series that finishes this August. It's about it took about 14 months to make The Ripper. I was on that for 14 months. And this stuff takes a long time, and it's interesting because when the subject of the Ripper, well, not one of the subjects, the killer, Peter Sutcliffe, actually died of COVID in November, and then we were all set to release a few weeks later anyway. I mean, that was already what we were going to do. And then it's just funny how people online are going, oh my gosh, Netflix just whipped up this thing because he died. And it's like, guys, you have no idea how long it takes to make something. No, so actually what I can't talk in specifics what I'm making at the moment, but I was just doing a lot of, we were basically shooting for 4 weeks, but it was doing all remote interviews. So I was here in London doing all the interviews via Zoom, but with local crews all over the States. And it was just a really difficult shoot, especially because most of the interviews were in LA. And so I'm up to 3 a.m. doing interviews every night, and it was just exhausting. And just the logistics and the planning and the organization that went into filming something during COVID was just a nightmare. And I just had zero free time. But yeah, so that's basically why I couldn't do it. But
okay.
Yeah.
Is this new project? You can tell me if you can't say anything, but is it another true crime series?
Yeah, it's in that vein, although it's not like serial killer or anything like that. It features true crime, but it features a lot. It's quite different, and really sort of quite crazy and wild. And anyone I tell it to, like composers that I'm looking for, editors or anything, they just can't believe it.
Oh, good.
How wild it is. But yeah, so that. But I'm not supposed to say anything about it until the company I'm working for decides to do their own press release. But that'll be out, I think, September, October of this year, something like that.
We're looking forward to it.
Cool.
Okay, so back to The Ripper, which is obviously something that you can talk about.
Yeah.
For those who are listening that don't know, it is a story that covers the Yorkshire Ripper, who was a serial killer that kind of tormented women throughout the late 70s in northern England.
Yeah.
So you directed the series alongside Elena Wood, right?
Yeah, another director by the name of Elena Wood, yeah.
Elena. How did you connect with her, and how did the idea of documenting this story about the Yorkshire Ripper come about?
Well, so it was a production company by the name of Raw, who are based in London. I've worked with them before. I made a film, my second doc, The Prince of Pennsylvania, for ESPN with them back in 2015. And I had done some other work with them, some development and producing and things. And we've been trying to find another project to work on together. And we weren't always able to because of scheduling or whatever. And this project came along, they called me in, we had a chat about it, and I was like, I'm down, this is great, this is really cool. But it was going to be a four-part series, but they needed 2 directors, and it was sort of a first doing something like that for both Elena and I, So that was interesting. Usually when you're the captain of the ship, and now you're the captain of a ship, but with another captain, and it was kind of interesting to navigate those waters together. And yeah, so it was something where they approached me about it, and that's kind of what's nice about my line of work is that I can, if I have a story that I'm developing that I want to produce, I can, reach out to companies and pitch them ideas, and we can try and get them made or not. But then also in between those, they reach out to me about stories that they've got commissioned, and then I can work on them with them if I like the story. So that's basically how that worked out. It was a story that had already been developed and commissioned, and they came to me to be one of the directors on it.
That's amazing.
Yeah, really cool. I mean, people get in touch with you and offer you cool stories. Yeah, I mean, it's awesome.
So
it certainly helps because, finding a really great story is really difficult. I've been holding on to Jason's story for so long. I had no idea. I mean, I knew it was an incredible story, but I really had no idea just how rare stories like that are until, and I remember doing Q&As all over the world after screenings, and the first question they'd always ask me is, how did you find the story? And I was like, why did they keep asking me that? And it wasn't until I went to make another film, I was like, oh, now I see, because it's impossible to find a great story that hasn't already been told, that isn't being told, that doesn't want to be told. You know what I mean? It's really hard, and especially in the last 7 to 8 years, or even 10 years, actually, going beyond, when documentary has just exploded. I mean, it was always, there and available, but I think when people heard documentaries, usually they thought History Channel or Nazis, or, do you know what I mean, or nature. It really wasn't until about 10 years ago when it's just become this massive thing, and especially with Netflix and series like Making a Murderer and stuff, and where it's really become something that the masses enjoy. Because I really do think before it was sort of a specialized thing, and it was sort of seen as like a kind of like, it was like the artistic side of filmmaking or something. It wasn't meant to be, watched for enjoyment or entertainment,
Right.
As it is now, which, I think is really interesting. So anyway, there's a lot of competition now, and especially because, and from my own experience, they cost a lot less to make than, a scripted film. And so I think everyone's just trying to make them now. And so finding a fresh, original story is just so difficult. As soon as you hear about it, like if you read about it on Facebook, in some news article, or it's like 6 months into production already. I mean, I'm telling you, it's impossible to find a good story.
Well, and it's interesting that you touch on that, because you kind of sounded like you were like in the news broadcasting, like, got to get the best, latest, and greatest documentary out there, and who can do it first, and who can find the best story.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. I suppose, in a way, documentary is journalism, I guess, in a way. Some documentaries are more journalistic than others.
Yeah.
But it's true. I mean, they're true stories, and you're telling them in a specific way. Some people have specific angles. There's some have specific agendas, and there was a time, again, about 10 years ago, there was a big swathe of sort of social issue documentaries. That was like the thing at the time. It was social issue documentaries and climate change documentaries and things like that, which are amazing. So you go through these trends, and then lately, the last 5 years has been true crime, and that's been the thing. But I think, just as ultimately we're storytellers, and I think you just want to find a great story to tell that that is going to be seen by people. Do you know what I mean? It's I think that's the idea, is you want to sink your teeth into a really great story. You don't just want to tell a boring one. You want to get your hands on something that's really exciting and that excites you, and something that's going to be worth working 6-7 days a week on for 12, 14, 16 months. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
So Peter Sutcliffe was brought in for questioning several times during the investigation. Do you think the way the police handled that led to more women being murdered?
Yeah, I mean, and that was our, our whole perspective on that series was to just look at the way that a country responded to a crisis. It wasn't really to look at the murders or Peter Sutcliffe and examine his psychology and to get into the mind of a killer. It wasn't really about that. It was to look at how a country responded to this spate of murders that went on for 5 long years, and just sort of like basically using the crisis to examine the state of a country, to where the culture was at, where society was at a time, and just to examine it and just see the end result. And for sure, I mean, I think there was a lot of factors. I think, and we do mention it, obviously the lack of technology was a massive drawback for them. They didn't have, nowadays you can type, Command F and put in a name and it would link to everything else. Then it was all done on index cards. And so that wasn't going to help them. And I think they relied on their instincts a lot and their old ways of doing things. But the thing is, those ways were skewed from years of prejudice and bias, and it was just looking at how they turned their backs on a lot of evidence because it didn't fit their view or their idea of who this killer was or who he could be. And yeah, absolutely, I think they had blinders on basically and couldn't see the wood for the trees. And yeah, unfortunately, more women were killed than should have been. And I think it's even worse when a police officer says, I interviewed this guy, there's something really fishy about him, he looks a lot like the photo fit, there's all these other bits of evidence where he fits, but because he didn't have a specific accent that came in on the tape, he was he was told to basically get the hell out and don't talk to me about photo fits and stuff. And that is the most egregious one, I think, because they could have stopped him and 3 more women were then killed directly after that. And I think that's the one that's impossible to ignore and to deny. And that was really, really sad. And of course it weighed on the conscience of Andy Laptu, the officer that actually interviewed, one of the many officers that interviewed Sutcliffe, but one of the few that actually said something and said, I think we should look at this guy more closely, and he was turned away, basically.
Yeah.
So you do a really good job with your true crime, kind of giving a lot of respect to the victims and sympathizing with the victim's story. When you're creating these, do you must have to at certain points kind of put your mindset in line with the killer? Is that true, or how does that all work?
I mean, I think it's just with any film you make, with any story you tell, I think the best piece of advice I ever got was, what's it about? What's it about?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's important when you make anything. It's like, what? It's just and it's just simplifying it to one line, like or a very short synopsis about what is it about? Like, what are you trying to say? Whose perspective is it? Whose story are you telling? And I think once you work all that out, then it's just sticking with it, because if you don't, it could end up being a gigantic mess. And I think it's just about, especially with true crime, and the reason, you know, a lot of directors now have been doing true crime is it's just what is it's just kind of in vogue at the moment, and I think it's where a lot of work is coming from, and I think it's where a lot of platforms like Netflix and Amazon, Discovery, it's sort of the thing that I think a lot of people are really fascinated with at the moment. But I think there's a fine line between, you know, making or telling a story and then just with a purpose and with a point of view and with a point, quite frankly, and just creating entertainment. And I think, and that's with any story, with any documentary, but then when you start getting into murders and people actually losing their lives, and if it's just entertainment, then I think that's a really, I think that's when it becomes really problematic, true crime, because you have to have respect for the victims. You can't lose sight of what you're, you know, what story you're telling. And they're not just pawns in this kind of game or whatever to tell this story. It's so I mean, I don't know if I put myself in the mind of the killer or anything. I think you certainly want to try and understand your characters, you know, and I think but again, it just comes down to what story you're telling, and I think because you're trying to tell the best story possible, that's what you focus on. You're like, how do I tell this story in the best way possible, the most interesting way, and in a way that's going to get the kind of the point across, you know, in a way that's going to make it clear to the audience what you're trying to say. So I don't think I really kind of try and get into the mind, but certainly, you know, just try to understand what's happening within the story for sure.
So I think the last we looked, Ripper was sitting at number 4 on Netflix, and were you kind of surprised about how well received it was?
I was, it did really well here in the UK, because obviously it's a UK story. It was number 1, I think, over here for over 2 weeks. I was really, really blown away by that. And then I heard it did really well in the States and, you know, in other countries, Australia and things. I mean, I think there's just so much on Netflix now that, I mean, stuff comes out and I don't even know about it until like 6 months later. I'm like, what? That's on, oh, I got to check that out. Do you know what I mean? It's just, so I was worried that it was going to become just one of those where it was just in a massive pile people were trying to get through. But I think they really promoted it and were really behind us and stuff. And so, yeah, I was surprised, and I was really happy, because at the end of the day, you know, you work on something for 14 months, and as hard as we did on it, you want people to see it. You know, it's when you bust your ass working on something and then no one sees it. I mean, that's just like, what was the whole point? Why did I even do that? You know?
Yeah.
So it's I was super surprised, and yeah, you know, it's really satisfying to see something, to know that people are actually seeing your work for sure.
Well, you're very skilled at what you do, so it's not a surprise.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I know, just one more thought on this topic. I absolutely love true crime. I have for years and years, books and documentaries and just following stories. And I really appreciate your take on your storylines, because a lot of people do focus on the killer, who the killer was, why he did it, where did he come from, what was his background. And, you know, in The Ripper, we don't really even put a face to the killer until the end. And it really was about how he terrorized the community and you brought the viewer back into the 70s with all of the old footage, and just, at the end where everyone is protesting. And I think you guys did a really good job of highlighting who these victims were, right? They were people, they had families, they had children. So it was just a fresh take for me on somebody who watches true crime, like, on a regular basis.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate that. And I think, and I think it's just important not to, I think it's important to remember that, the victims in these stories were real people, and with people who loved them and who were, taken so viciously. And I think it's just, you just want to pay them respect. I mean, I'm not saying you have to make every time you talk about true crime or murder or something, you have to make it about them. I think you just can't, you have to treat them with respect at least.
Yes.
And I think there's also nothing wrong with making a doc or telling a story about a killer and having it focus on them and trying to learn what I think there is some merit to that. I think it's just it's how it's executed, and I think it's the intent. If the intent is just to sort of is just to be salacious about it and entertain an audience with blood and gore, and you're not how can you respect victims if you're doing that? And I just think I think it's just something you need to really be careful about, because it is very, very easy it's super, super easy to just make it this entertaining thing where you like heroize the killer, or you romanticize the killings, even sexualize the killings and eroticize the killings. And I think it's just too easy to do that. And you have to, you just need to make sure you treat the subjects with respect, and just, have a reason for doing it. Is the reason that you're getting into the mind of a killer, is it literally just to entertain people? Or is it because you actually have something to say about it? It's because you're genuinely trying to figure something out.
Right.
But if it's just to sort of, revel in the grisly details, then that's just that's pornographic, really, isn't it?
Yes. Yep. Agreed. So I want to do a time check. We've already had you for an hour, which blows my mind. Do you have time for a few more questions, or do you want to wrap it up?
Yeah, that's cool.
Okay. So we're going to kind of jump around a little bit, because I know we touched on Jason Becker's film, and then we kind of went to The Ripper. But you obviously have some other projects out there. One series that we really love was Hear No Evil, and you directed a couple episodes off of that series, right?
Yeah.
So, Sex, Lies, and Audiotapes.
Yes.
That episode blew our mind, because we both, throughout the entire episode, kept looking at each other like, no, she did it. No, he did it. No, she totally did it. No, he
Right.
absolutely did it.
Yeah.
What is your take, now that you had time to reflect on the facts of that story? Do you have thoughts on that? Because that's really an incredible story. So Shannon was actually the perpetrator, and it came down to the audio tapes.
The audio tapes, yes. Yeah. That was just a wild story. And I think the way we wanted to tell it, and it wasn't like, this twist, it was a massive twist ending, but it wasn't sort of manufactured in the way just so it was a twist. You know what I mean? That was the way we basically wanted to tell it, from the perspective of Shannon actually believing it. And so you believe that she is being terrorized by this guy the whole time, because that is the lie she's trying to sell.
Yep.
And so she's trying to sell that lie to her family, to herself, to the police. And so we wanted to sell that lie to the audience as well. So they went on this journey with her, and on this lie. And then the evidence obviously points in the other direction. And so it's sort of like a hard-hitting, shock in the end. So that one was really interesting. And I remember we met with her family, and they really, really believed that she was innocent, and I really felt for them. They were really, good people. And when the limited time I spent with them, I felt like they were decent people. But when your son or daughter commits something like that, I guess it's easier to convince yourself or to tell yourself that they didn't do it. I think denial is a very powerful drug, and it's a survival mechanism, I think, and I think it's easier to deal with that lie than it is to accept reality, but also because once you do that, you have to accept that your child is capable of something like that. And it's a sad story too, because obviously she has kids and stuff, and who knows why people do what they do, but she did it, and it was pretty terrible.
Yeah, it was, absolutely. I think the production of that kind of stood out to us because you really did take us through a journey of he's crazy, she's a victim, all the way through, and then you go back through the story from Jameer's side of things. She was crazy and she was kind of stalking me, and she found out that I had a fiance, you know what I mean? So you took us through one journey, and then it was like, oh, wait.
Yeah, well, I guess there's two sides to every story, isn't there? And it's just about getting to some version of the truth. And I think when it comes down to it, it's just about looking at facts, and that was the facts of the case. And Detective Pate, that was what he put together through his evidence. And it was just pretty horrible that someone had to be killed. It was really bad, and but that's true crime, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, we live in a world where people kill each other, and I think just to ignore that and not make it a part of something that you talk about or something that you try and examine, I think it would be ignoring it, and I don't think that's healthy either. But it is just about finding a healthy way to approach those subjects.
Yeah.
Can we ask you a high level overview of your involvement with the Raindance Film Festival?
God, you know what? That is another lifetime ago.
That festival is in a bunch of cities around the world, right? Big cities?
It might be now, but I don't. I honestly, I don't know. And especially now with COVID and stuff, everything, all festivals are online now, or they're just canceled outright. I know South by Southwest, the music and the film festival last year canceled, and that was, I think they're in April or May, and that was only at the very beginning of the pandemic and the lockdown and everything. They might be, but I don't know. Again, I've been so out of that for so many years. But they are mainly in London. They started almost 30 years ago now, or over the. I'm trying to think. No, about 27 or 8 years, something like that. Because I think I produced the 14th, 15th, and 16th festivals. And before that, I had other roles and other positions within the festival. But it is a really great way to working in a film festival is a really great way to meet filmmakers, meet lots of cool people, watch a ton of great films. And as a producer, I have to say, that was super cool because I could actually concoct meeting my heroes and stuff. I remember one year Les Claypool had a film out, and I was like, let's get that for the festival and let's fly him over and let's put him up and let's make him a feature a feature director at the festival, and totally made it happen. And that was cool. That was another moment in my life where I was just like really shocked when I saw him. I remember he was walking through the lobby of the hotel, going to meet him, making sure everything was cool. And I don't normally do that. I had someone who would go and meet with people, people out of town, and I was like, I'm going to come with you because I have to meet Les Claypool. And it was such a cool thing, and the guy was just such a cool dude. And I remember he's a massive Beatles fan, as am I. And then there was a screening of this Cirque du Soleil back in 2008. We're releasing this film about this new show they were doing called Love. I didn't see it, but and it was all Beatles music, and they made a doc about it. And sorry, I just lost my train of thought. Let me go back. So they were making this documentary about the making of the Cirque du Soleil show called Love with Beatles music, and George Martin I think he was involved in it somehow. Again, it's so long ago, but George Martin was there at the screening, and I was like, oh my God. And everybody knows the Beatles. They know George Martin was considered the fifth Beatle. He was the Beatles producer, and he was just this genius producer who worked at Abbey Road Studios, and a really incredible, really cool guy. And he was in his 80s, still really handsome and still quite with it and agile, and he was a really cool guy. And I remember Les Claypool met him and was just, well, he didn't meet him yet. I remember George Martin walking past him, and this look on Les Claypool's face was just like, oh my God, that is George Martin. And then a buddy of mine who was working at the festival was hanging out with Les Claypool, and was just blown away and he's on the phone to his friend in South Africa saying, oh, I just met Les Claypool. And on the other side of the room, Les Claypool's on his phone calling his friend saying, I just met George Martin. It was really funny. And then Les Claypool actually wrote a song about his experience coming to the festival called "What Would Sir George Martin Do?" And I thought that was so cool. He talked about losing his luggage. Delta Airlines lost his luggage on the way to London, and it was really, he wrote a whole song about his experience. It was really cool. So that was an awesome moment. And as producer, you can do things like that. You can. We had a jury. You have jury. Juries at festivals who then select what films win Best Doc and what's Best feature film and Best Short Film and all this stuff. And I put together a jury with Iggy Pop was on it, and he actually he called me, but I was in a screening. I thought it was my mom calling me or something like that. So I just I just ended the call, and then I get a voicemail later, and it's this guy going, "Hey Jesse, this is Iggy giving." I was like, "Whoa, Iggy Pop's calling me." So that was a cool job for so many reasons, but really it was just a way for me to manufacture meeting my heroes. Was what it was.
We do that with this podcast sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's so cool to meet people, and especially when they're cool. I haven't met anyone who's a dick yet.
That's good.
And that's really good. But yeah, especially when they're awesome people. And I've actually found the more talented someone is, usually the cooler they are, the nicer they are. I think it's the people who are really insecure that can be dicks, But yeah, that was I had the weirdest night of my life at Raindance. We had Corey Feldman over, and from the Goonies and Lost Boys, and he was doing this retrospective, and there was all these weird people there who were hounding him for autographs, and he was signing them, but they just were relentless, and they had stacks and stacks and stacks and stacks of stuff for him to sign. And he was there with his wife at the time and his young son, who was only 7 years old, and he starts freaking out because they're just this mob is forming, and I'm trying to get him into a car, and these freaks are chasing him down the street. It was so weird. And then later on at night, I'm hanging out with Les Claypool. It was just the weirdest night of my life. But yeah, it was a wild time. Really wild time. I'm digging up all these memories I hadn't thought of before. Well, haven't thought of in a while.
Sounds surreal.
It was super surreal. Yeah, it was a really weird night.
So we read somewhere that Stanley Kubrick is your favorite or one of your favorite filmmakers.
Yeah, definitely. I think he's probably a lot of people's favorite directors. I think the thing about him is I just remember being a kid and maybe like 14 or something, and I remember seeing Clockwork Orange and just thinking like, that is the weirdest.
Yeah.
That, like, you know, I think, and when I was that young, I wasn't really analyzing it. I wasn't looking at it as you know, the narrative or even filmmaking or camera angle or anything. I just knew it made me feel a way I had never felt before, and I thought, that is really interesting. And then when I went to film school and started studying film and started learning more about how to make a film and started, you know, how to break down what's happening in a scene, and started kind of learning more about that, I realized, you know, once I saw the parts and how he was putting them together, I was just like completely blown away. And I think the guy was a genius, and I think his films have this coldness, this sort of this kind of out of body, like you're sort of watching his films from out of body or something like that, and they're detached and cold in a way. And I don't know, I'm just really drawn to the way his films make me feel. And of course his precision and everything. And yeah, I like the guy's amazing.
Is that your favorite of his films?
Clockwork, you know, it probably is.
Yeah.
It was my favorite film for a very long time. I think it probably is my favorite film of his. I really love 2001. I really love Barry Lyndon a lot. I mean, everyone loves The Shining. I love The Shining. Full Metal Jacket. I really love Eyes Wide Shut. I mean, yeah, the guy's awesome. And I mean, people don't realize he actually directed Spartacus and
I didn't know that.
Doctor Strangelove. I mean, Doctor Strangelove, I think, is the one that put him on the map. But and of course, 2001 is the one that turned him into like a living legend. But I think, yeah, he didn't make a lot of films. I thought that was really cool. He wasn't very prolific. He sort of took his time. He would take 5 years. I think it took him, I think, from 1980s when The Shining was released, and then Full Metal Jacket wasn't released till 86. So he takes his time. Although he was writing in between that period. He had a Napoleon film he'd been working on for years. He had that got shelved because it was a Napoleon film made that bombed in the 70s. He was working on a World War II film. I think it was called The Aryan Papers, but then Schindler's List came out, and so he shelved that for a while. Of course, he was working on artificial intelligence, AI, but he was shelving that. He was waiting for the technology and filmmaking to reach a point where he could make it, but of course he passed away, so Spielberg did it. So, I mean, between 86, you know, Eyes Wide Shut came out in 99, so he took, 13 years he didn't have any films released, and I don't know, there's something about, the fact that he was like a recluse and a bit of a hoarder when it came to, like information and history, and he was brilliant at chess and, and photography. I think the thing that draws me the most to him, though, is his eye, I think just how you look at, because he was a photographer for Time magazine before he was ever a filmmaker, and his photos are incredible, and he shot a lot of the stuff himself, or he would at least operate some of it himself, and he just had an incredible eye and a really different, weird way of looking at the world and humanity and stuff, and I think that was just super cool. And he had this like kind of autonomy from the studios that most directors don't get to have, where he could just do whatever he wanted. There was no compromises. I mean, he actually pulled A Clockwork Orange from cinemas here in the UK. There was like a bunch of kids beat a homeless man to death, I think, and he pulled it, and they were like, yeah, whatever Stanley says, goes, which is amazing. And I think so that film actually wasn't shown here for so many years. And I was actually here in London in 2001, I think, or 2001 or 2, when they showed it on TV for the first time since it was pulled, and I thought that was really cool.
Yeah. Wow. I have a 2-part question. Hopefully, not take up
Sure.
a ton of your time.
That's
so
cool.
I'll condense this. What are your thoughts on Werner Herzog, and what are your thoughts on his dismissing the storyboard technique?
Oh, where he says, storyboards are for cowards or
Yes.
whatever. Yeah, I
Great
thought that was
accent.
hilarious.
Yeah, you
I'm
did
sure
that
was
well.
Terrible. Yeah. Werner's awesome. Wow. I mean, he's just like, he's his own guy. I mean, he's just incredible. I have a massive amount of respect for that guy. I think he can, he's one of those guys who can just do whatever he wants. I think he can say whatever he says. I think it's fine. I think if he doesn't need story, I mean, I can't draw, so I don't really draw storyboards. But then, if you don't want to do that, then cool. And if you don't have to do that, cool. I think it just depends on how you handle anxiety. Because when I some of my films, I do film drama portions to illustrate certain scenes that don't exist in archive or anything like that, which has been done for many years. But when I get to do that process, so, I do create shot lists sometimes, or I just try to be prepared as possible. So when I rock up on the day, I'm not. I can actually give people direction, actually give people instructions of what to do. And I guess just depends on how quick you are, how smart you are, how you handle anxiety. I mean, me personally, it's just so when I rock up on the day, I'm not just a ball of nervous energy because I have a plan,
Yeah.
But if Werner's such a badass, I mean, if he doesn't need a plan, cool, man. Like, that's cool. So yeah, I think he can. He can do whatever he wants. And I love when he acts. I love when he's in films, because he plays such a great villain. I know he was in what's that Tom Cruise one where he's like a tough guy, Jack Reacher. He was like the villain in Jack Reacher.
Oh,
I thought
yeah.
he was really cool, and he was a bad guy in The Mandalorian. And I think he just has the coolest voice, and his docs are really good. He did this doc where he was in Antarctica, and it's just so funny. Like he's just hilarious, and he injects humor in ways that you don't expect. And
Yeah.
he's a cool guy. I personally I prefer his docs to his scripted features.
Yeah.
Personally, but
Speaking of his acting, have you seen Julian Donkey Boy?
Yeah, oh my God, he's awesome in that.
He's a maniac.
He's a maniac. Yeah, he's great in that. God, I forgot about that movie. That movie's really great. That's probably my favorite Harmony Korine film for sure.
Oh, nice. So you've seen Gummo too?
Yeah, Gummo. Yeah, I've seen Gummo, Julian Donkey Boy, Kids. Obviously, well, he wrote Kids, didn't he? But he didn't direct it. And what was the Spring Breakers?
Yeah.
Was like a recent. Yeah, but Julian Donkey Boy was incredible.
Yeah.
But yeah, I forgot Werner was in that. He's like in his underwear the whole time, isn't he? He's tighty whitey.
I think he's drinking cough syrup out of a slipper in one scene.
Oh my God! Yeah. Yeah, they probably they probably told him making a documentary of his life and just rocked up. No, but he's super cool. Have you ever seen when he was giving an interview? I think it was in LA somewhere, and he got shot in the neck.
No. Wow.
Yeah, someone shot him in the neck with like a BB gun or a pellet gun or something like that, and he just carried on with the interview.
Wow.
He's like, it's just a flesh wound. And he carried on. He's a bad dude.
That's great.
Werner's awesome.
So I'm kind of interested to know if you are familiar with the West Memphis 3 story.
I am, yeah. I remember I was I am a massive fan of the of the Paradise Lost films. So when they came out in directed by Joe Berlinger, who did Some Kind of Monster. I loved those films. They came out on they were HBO. There was two of them, and HBO came out like the mid '90s. And I remember I loved them because I was a massive Metallica fan at the time, and they used like all Metallica music. It was mainly like Welcome Home Sanitarium, like mainly like puppets, stuff from Puppets, and they had like Welcome Home Sanitarium, and I just thought it was like the use of that music was really awesome, but also the way it was shot and the story about these, three kids who loved metal music, but they lived in, it was Tennessee, wasn't it? They lived in like, some backwater town and freaked people out. They thought they were witches or whatever, or devil worshippers, and I love those films. And then the third one came out like 5 years ago, and there was also a feature doc made about it as well. But that's an amazing story.
Yeah,
I think that's actually kind of what turned me on to the world of true crime, and that series was interesting because it kind of pokes holes in our justice system, and it really kind of makes you think about things.
Yeah, it really does. And I mean, it turned into a witch hunt. And I also think, it's interesting because you watch the first one, Paradise Lost. You can see the kids are kind of arrogant and they're sort of playing up to the cowards and stuff. And you're thinking, oh well, they did it because that's how monsters behave. It's like how Richard Ramirez behaved when he was caught. He had his sunglasses on. He thought he was a rock star and stuff. But they were like teenagers, and they were like arrogant, douchey teenagers, as we all are when we're kids. We're like arrogant little bastards, and that's how they're behaving. And I think what was interesting about the second film is you saw just how much prison matured them. You saw just how much they grew up, and they grew up fast, and they realized what they were involved in, the gravity of the situation they were involved in, that they were going to go away forever. And I thought that was really interesting, of just seeing them grow up and realize what they were involved in and how serious it really was. I think they were just enjoying the attention. They hadn't had any attention, and when they went down, it was like, oh, this is real, actually. But yeah, some people still think they did it. I don't think they did, but I think the evidence was pretty clear. I think there's sort of theories about who really did it, and I thought what was the feature doc called that came out about? Well, there was obviously Joe Berlinger's third film, but there was another one. Was it just West Memphis?
Yeah.
West of Memphis, I think.
Oh yeah, yep. I think you're right.
Yeah, I think it was West of Memphis. And I think it was not exec by Peter. What's his name? Who directed Lord of the Rings?
Oh, Jackson.
Peter Jackson. Yeah. Sorry, it's Sunday. It's end of the week.
Yeah.
But I think that was exec by him, and I thought that was really well done too. In a way, I was a bit annoyed though, because I was like, hey, this story's already being told. It's been told since the 90s. And so I sort of watched that film reluctantly because I know Joe Berlinger had his third film out, which is about, them being released and all this new evidence and stuff. But I watched it and I thought that was also really well done. So I think it's just a really, incredible case for sure.
Yes.
Definitely. All right. If you don't mind, we have a just opinion, this or that choice group of short questions for you. There's no right or wrong or explanation required. All right.
Okay.
So first is Full Metal Jacket or Platoon?
Oh, Full Metal Jacket.
All right. Karate Kid or Bloodsport?
Karate Kid.
Yes, I agree. Clockwork Orange or Slaughterhouse-Five?
Clockwork Orange.
Yeah. The Wolf of Wall Street or American Psycho?
American Psycho.
Yes.
I didn't really love The Wolf of Wall Street, if I'm honest.
Yeah. I agree with all your answers. Not that there was a right or wrong to any of them, but...
you started off by saying there's no right or wrong answer. Then you're like, yes.
Well, he picked all the ones I would have.
Awesome.
Okay, so let's wrap this up. And we've taken up a ton of your time, and we totally appreciate it.
Yeah.
So, what's next for Jesse?
So I'm working on another 4-part series that is due to be released later this year. I can't say too much about it, but it's also in the vein of true crime. But it is very different. It's not serial killers or anything like that. It's it also explores sort of cultural elements of the time as well, and it's a really wild story. It's actually really fun. It's a fun story that happens to have a little sprinkling of murder in it.
Oh, interesting.
But yeah, stay tuned. I'll let you know when it comes out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very cool. So we want to thank you immensely for your time.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, guys.
Wait,
and,
one more thing.
Sure.
Just one more quick thing. Not to be weird, but obviously we've done our research on you, right? So IMDb and Googling your name and figuring out who you are. So we both have a milestone birthday coming up next month. The same milestone birthday. So happy birthday to you.
Yeah.
Oh, happy birthday to you too.
Thank
I know,
you.
Big one, right?
Yeah.
God.
30. You said 30, right? 30?
30, yeah. Oh, no, I said 20.
I don't know if I want to be 20 again.
Yeah.
No, I wouldn't be 20 again. I'd be 30 again, though.
Yeah, I agree.
I'd be 30 again if only I could be where I am now at 30. Then I'd be cool with that. But I wouldn't want to have to do my 30s all over again and, go back to the beginning of a career sort of thing. But, yeah, but you know what? I think 40 is like the new 30, isn't it? It's like, I think when you look at like generations of people and you look at, people long ago, I mean, you're like, and then you actually look in the films and stuff and you're like, God, they're really old. And you look them up, they're like 46.
Yeah.
It's so, I think it's just, people look a lot younger and I think they're a lot healthier these days. And so I think 40 was always a little scary to me, but it's not so much anymore.
Yeah, I agree. I'm good with 40. I'm okay with it.
Yeah, I'm good. I won't be good with 50, but I'll be good. I'm good with 40 for now.
I got a year and a half until 50 hits.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. You don't sound 50. I know that sounds like weird to say.
No.
It doesn't sound. You actually sound really young.
Yeah, like 15.
No, like I thought, okay, like early 30s or something like that.
Okay.
You both sound really young.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you, Jesse, so much for your time. We so appreciate it. We enjoyed it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
It was fun. I enjoy talking about all this kind of stuff. It's really cool.
It was great, and we can't wait to see what you come up with next. I know it's going to be great, like all your other stuff.
Cool. Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right,
you.
Jesse. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
Thanks, guys. You too.
Thanks.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. See you. Bye.
What a cool guy.
Very.
Very talented.
Mm-hmm.
We had so many questions for him, and we obviously couldn't get to all of them and still remain respectful of his time. So who knows? Maybe there'll be a part 2.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be cool. And something he said, I know he wasn't talking about himself, but I think we've noticed a lot of times the more skilled or talented the people that we talk to are, like the more pleasant they are, the more down to earth they are, the more cool they are.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
absolutely.
And he's definitely one of them.
Yes.
I know he was kind of putting it in perspective to himself meeting people, but when he was saying that, I was thinking, you're one of those people for us.
Totally.
Yeah.
So we'll link to his IMDb because obviously we didn't get to talk about all of his projects, but there are some really cool ones out there that everyone should check out.
Yeah, there's a lot there.
I am a little bummed that I didn't get to ask him about Gypsy's Revenge,
Yeah,
because that is such a mind-blowing story.
it is.
And he covered it back in 2018. He did a documentary on it, and I just kind of wanted to ask his take on it. But
Yeah,
who knows?
yeah,
Future opportunities.
yeah.
Okay. We are ending with a song.
We are. We're going to end with a song by Carl Roa. This is Carl Roa of Roa's Ark that we played a few weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to hear Lord of the Strings.
Until next time, stay safe, stay healthy.
Don't be an asshole. And to quote Werner Herzog, look into the eyes of a chicken and you will see real stupidity. Don't be a chicken.